Thank you so much. And thank you to my panelists for being here. It is a very esteemed panel. And so I'm really excited to get all of your views on content and how athletes can build brands when they're still playing and then afterward, of course. And Molly, you work with Kobe Bryant, who is one of the most visible players who has been able to successfully evolve his brand. What do you think Kobe's approach has been, and what are some of the lessons that athletes who look at him as a model can take from the way he's approached?
Our approach, I think content becomes a bucket word, right? And there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. Our approach has been at Granity Studios is more the original fiction content side. So we are publishing novels, podcasts, looking at developing those novels into films, animated shows. But it's more, our approach has been a multimedia kids content studio that's all based on his creative ideas. So I think there's different levels of content that you can approach. One from a just brand building PR standpoint. I think you can branch into content that still capitalizes on your celebrity, but becomes more of a community and a platform, like Derek did with Players Tribune. I think we're doing a little bit of that with Kobe's show on ESPN Plus called Detail, where it started with him, but now it's a bigger concept that welcomes in other athletes and other sports. And then all the way to the original IP and creating your own ideas and creating something that's timeless that can live without your celebrity. So that's been a little bit of our approach. I think, Nico, the challenge with that is getting people to get in your sandbox when Kobe wants to be a content creator, but everybody wants him to be Kobe Bryant, the basketball player. And they want his content to be Kobe Bryant, the basketball player. So that is a huge challenge. And I think the earlier athletes get started with solidifying that they're more than what they do on the field or on the court will help them when they make that transition to full-time and to content, if that's the business endeavor they want to take.
And something that all of you have in common is a commitment to helping, in part, athletes tell their stories. I can say, being a journalist, it's not always easy to be a storyteller. And so, Jeff, how do you help to build that bridge for athletes who want to tell their stories, want to say more about themselves, perhaps through the Players Tribune, but don't have much experience?
Yeah, I mean, that is the original purpose of why the Players Tribune exists. It's athlete-founded, and it's there to serve the athletes' needs and to help them tell those stories. And I think the one thing that, that if you're in the content business or you want to get in the content business, you learn really quickly it's very difficult to tell stories really well. It can also be very expensive to tell stories really well. And that's where we sort of see the role that we play specifically for the athlete community is for us to be their partner in helping them tell that story or the story that they want to tell in whatever format or forum that it's going to work best as well, whether that's a written piece, whether that's a video, whether it's a series of videos, whether that's a podcast. It's really all, each panel talks about that, whatever we were doing 12 months ago is not what we'll be doing 12 months from now. And that's really what the role that we play is really trying to keep up with the way that stories are being told, the way that stories could be told, but doing it specifically and exclusively for athletes. And, one platform, of course, that athletes can tell their stories is on YouTube. And so, Erin, please walk us through, for those who may not know, what YouTube Sports is doing right now and how you guys are approaching sports programming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you think about our origins, we started off as really focused on clips and highlights. So a couple years ago, we started working with leagues and with different clubs, really kind of partnering to build out our clips and highlights business. And that was kind of the origin, specifically for our on-demand business. And, it's worked actually insanely well. Right now, we have the largest catalog of highlights in the world. And that's growing 80% year over year. And so for us, we realized, okay, this is awesome. We have highlights that can be viewed all over the world. We're working with essentially every league globally. And so now we're sort of thinking about what is the evolution of our business and really kind of helping athletes. So a couple of years ago, we also started really working in and leaning in to working more closely with athletes and helping them and really supporting them and getting onto the platform and beginning to tell their stories in authentic ways. And that's what's at the core of YouTube, right? We started off as the first sort of user-generated streaming platform. And so now what's actually really interesting, and again, this is consistent with the evolution of where we are really thinking about live and kind of leaning into that. So we announced in April that we'll be live streaming 13 MLB games, which is a first. It's exclusive on YouTube. And this is really an opportunity for us to partner with this new league, MLB, to help them expand their audience globally. And it's also an opportunity for us to really lean into this content and grow our live business.
Mm-hmm. And Molly, you mentioned a bit earlier that you think it's important for athletes to start to try to build their brands relatively early in their careers. You know, for folks who may have played, sports during elementary school, middle school, all the way through college, and perhaps didn't think about their brand, thought about, their craft and their skills, how can one sort of approach figuring out what that brand should be?
It's, to me, it's what you care about. Plain and simple. It's that easy. I think, just working with Kobe, he always knew that he wanted to teach the next generation. So I think when he was done, he wanted his legacy to be bigger than his accomplishments on the court. So I think if you know what you care about and you start with your purpose, I think content can be a tool to support that purpose. But it could be, it could range from anything, and content could be the thing that you care about and storytelling be what you want to do, or it can be a tool and a mechanism to support what your passion may be. So I think it's just much like athletes play their sport because they love it. It's figuring out what are you going to love next, or how are you going to take what you've done for 20 years and maximize that audience that you've built, maximize the people that you've met, and use it to catapult you further in what it is that you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm. And Jeff, I want you to jump in on that. How do you sort of think in terms of time? Earlier in your career, it might help your on-court or on-field persona and brand as well. But perhaps someone is more likely to be thinking about their legacy later in their playing days.
Yeah, and I think that every young athlete is already thinking about their brands just by virtue of the fact that they're on social and they have an audience. So that's a new concept, and that didn't exist 5 years ago. So I think the younger athletes are at an advantage because they understand the power of those platforms. They understand the role that content can play, and they're on their phones and they're posting every single day. So they're in it and they're living it. I think that where a lot of folks are playing catch up is that it's not just building that audience, but also, back to Molly's point, what does your brand stand for? Because up to now, a lot of athletes are just known as that one thing that they do, which is being excellent on the court or on the field, but that's not what the athletes want to be only known for. And that's what we spend a lot of time talking about, which is what is that other passion, and how can we help athletes, dimensionalize themselves beyond just that one thing that they're known for, and do it through the power of storytelling to show that I am a father, I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm all these other things besides the one thing that you just want to think about me for. And that's the real power of storytelling. And that's, I think, what's really exciting about all these different platforms, as well as having all the tools of production getting cheaper and cheaper to do, and in the hands of all these athletes, is that now they really can control their brands, regardless of whether they're just starting or if they're well on their way to transitioning even.
Mm-hmm. To build on that, I also think it's about really inspiring the next generation, right? So we see, or the public sees athletes as an athlete playing a sport and excelling and being amazing, but we don't see the behind the scenes, right? And I actually think that's really powerful if you think about sort of the next generation of athletes, or, people sort of being able to look at an athlete and say, hey, you're from my hometown. I'm also interested in this sport that you've clearly excelled at, and now I can understand your journey. That is insanely powerful, right? And so I think the real power of these platforms is being able to authentically tell a story, but it's really about inspiring the next generation.
Mm-hmm. And Molly, I'm wondering, if someone is starting out, there may be folks who are here who may be successful in starting to build a brand, but perhaps want to transition into developing more content and diversifying what they do. how should they begin? Should there be an apparatus around them? Folks who have experience in that. What should that look like?
Yeah, I think building a team is obviously paramount, especially if an athlete is still active in their playing career. That's a full-time job. So I think if you're able to articulate what content you want to create and for what purpose, I think putting a team around you that can bring that vision to life is paramount. I think also partnerships is a huge challenge in this space. And I think, over the course of time, there's been a breakdown of trust between athletes and major news outlets, and Jeff can speak to this, but I think it's the bigger challenge is finding a way to distribute your content, your story, in a way that you feel like you can control it and own it and really monetize it in a way that's benefiting you and your business. So I think things like YouTube Sports, if you can go in and you can kind of conceptualize what you want to do and what you want to say, or Players Tribune, I think that's extremely attractive. I think the challenging part now is how do you monetize that, and how do you trust partners, and how do you keep control of your story and your narrative in a way that makes you comfortable? And I think that's a little bit of the tipping point of where we are right now.
And on that, I think what we see is that the telling of the story and the dimensionalizing the player is not just the player, is actually does create more revenue opportunities for players, because now the players are known for things other than the one thing they're known for, which brings sponsors or brands that may not have known that player for that thing before, but now it's a natural sort of fit for why a P&G brand might want to work with this player, based upon the fact that they've now told more about themselves or dimensionalized themselves in a more impactful way that really relates to a different audience.
Mm-hmm. And Jeff, since Players Tribune is a place where athletes can come and discuss sensitive things and personal things about themselves, I'm wondering, how do you suggest athletes should deal with situations in which there may be tension between their persona and either the team they work for or the league that they're a part of?
I'd say that players don't necessarily come to us to air grievances about the game or the team or the league. It's really about something that's more personal to them, and typically it doesn't even involve the league or the team. Whether it's Kevin Love talking about struggles with mental health. In that instance, it was the opposite. In that instance, it was the team and his players who actually came to his support when he put that story out there, and they were a big part of even the distribution of that story just by virtue of rallying around him and supporting him. So I think it actually works the other way around, is that what we see is, one, is it gives the player the ultimate control of the story and the final sign-off rights of that story, which is what they're not getting through traditional sort of media. But it also allows them to activate their community to help sort of share that story and distribute that for them, which leads to not only building more audience, but doing it in a more authentic way.
Mm-hmm. But Molly, there have been some pretty high-profile instances over the decades of, times when a player is seen as too controversial, either because of, their persona, because of their political stances, their activism. We live in a post-Colin Kaepernick world, and I'm wondering, what you think about how players should navigate that if they're in a league that may be a bit more conservative, and also, what sort of leeway do players have, since we are, post-Colin Kaepernick, to actually be honest about their activism, their political views?
Not to repeat an answer, Nico, but it's what you care about, and that's all that matters. And I think if you're passionate about something and you have a platform to educate people or share that passion, I think if you're comfortable with it, you take it. And I was at the NBA Awards on Monday night, and Robin Roberts received an award, and she said, "My mom taught me, make your mess your message." But if you have something to share and you have a large platform to share it and you're compelled to do so, I think it's a day and age where athletes are able to do that, and I think that's a great thing. But I think it's what you care about, and it can't be manufactured, because people will see through that as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that, because of the Colin Kaepernick experience, there's more leeway? You said sort of in this day and age. I mean, do leagues and teams have less power now than they perhaps used to?
I don't know if it's less power. I think that's a large statement. I think it's more comfort and to what Erin said about teaching the next generation. I think there's been some athletes who have stepped out and, other athletes, and Jeff has said players supporting athletes, players supporting players is a great thing. But I think, if you see people who take a stand and come through the other side and are successful, then that makes it easier for the next generation to do that. So, I don't think it's a power thing. Again, I think it's a personal choice and what you're comfortable doing.
And heading back to content, Erin, I'm wondering why you think athletes should choose YouTube to partner with and put content on when there's so many video platforms these days that, sort of maybe on their phones that they use all the time.
Sure. I mean, the reality is athletes can choose the platform and should choose the platform or platforms that work the best for them. Right? And so it's really about sort of being authentic to the story that you want to tell. And every platform operates very differently. Right? And so YouTube, actually, I think we are amazing at empowering athletes to tell their authentic stories. We're amazing at helping athletes really connect and engage with their fans in authentic ways. And some of that has to do with what's underlying or at the core of our platform. And the reality is we started off as a UGC oriented business. And so we've always been an open platform, always about sort of giving people a voice and showing them the world. And so that's at the core. And then the other thing is that I think is really distinct about YouTube is the focus on longer form content. So people come to YouTube and they spend time on YouTube, and a lot of content exists, right, that is longer form. And so, I'll give you an example. Kevin Durant has a channel on YouTube, and one of his most successful videos is a 35-minute documentary, right? And this was his experience leading up to the 2017 NBA championship. And so that, again, one of the most successful videos on his channel, 3+ million views, and it was an amazing video, right? And so that's actually where I think YouTube really shines.
I'll give you one more plug for YouTube.
Oh yeah, feel free.
I think YouTube's also becoming increasingly important, especially on the global scale. So as sports, are clearly more global, especially around global football, NBA, it's a great way for U.S.-based athletes to also increase their exposure to other markets and that have interest in NBA and otherwise. So we spent a lot of time doing that. We did some crossover content with Steph Curry and with Neymar, and we put it on YouTube because we know those are two global superstar athletes, and that's the platform that really reaches the global audience. Absolutely.
I think the global piece is huge. And just to add maybe one more, I think about YouTube, and I encourage YouTube creators to think about YouTube is a digital library for all of their content, right? There's a diversity of content that exists on YouTube, and it can really serve as that repository for athletes and any creator.
Mm-hmm. And Molly, athletes are often famous, they're often very admired, but I'm wondering how difficult it can be to be taken seriously if they, go into meetings in Hollywood or New York trying to develop content.
Yeah, I think the one benefit of athletes moving into content is that the meetings are easy, right? Everybody will do the meeting. I think if you don't have the idea or the content to back it up, your deal is going to be hard. And I don't know that that's not true for any content creator on the planet, right? But I think getting the meeting is the easy part. Getting the deal done and doing it in a way that you're comfortable with, in a way that makes you money, a little bit more challenging. So I think that's kind of the next frontier for a lot of athletes is how do you monetize this? How do you make this a business versus just a brand campaign for yourself, right? And I think, it's not easy, and it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years.
Yeah, one thing I'll just add to that, and this is why I think YouTube is really important, and maybe many other platforms do this as well, but we actually view it as our responsibility to help athletes get started, right? And we want to work with any athlete who's interested in working with us. And so maybe, you don't have a fully baked idea, but you're interested in creating a channel, figuring out how this platform can work for you. I mean, by all means, it's our responsibility to help make that work, right? And then, we'll sort of really kind of kickstart the experience. Now, no one can tell someone else's story, right? So it's the athlete is the best person in the world to tell their own story. And so our responsibility is to just kind of serve as that support mechanism to ensure that the story is told and gets the views and gets the global audience and, creates the opportunities that they want to have in the world.
And we're running out of time, but I just want to quickly go around and ask each of you for an athlete besides Kobe. We know Kobe's doing well. He has an Oscar, yes. Who's done a great job of building their brand and developing content, either current players or former players. And Molly, we can start with you.
I don't think we've done due diligence on discussing what some of the ladies are doing. I think we should expect to see some more fun things out of Alex Morgan. And she's a little busy this summer, but I think she's dabbled in the content space and taken some risks and done some things that are really interesting. So I'm excited to see what Alex is going to do, especially coming out of World Cup this summer.
Jeff?
Probably haven't heard the last of Megan Rapinoe either.
Yes, right.
I think if you look holistically, who's an active player and who's done a really great job, I do think that Steph Curry's done an amazing job. And even the last panel talking about like how hard it is to remain at an elite level and also find the spare time to do something else at an elite level. And I think that Steph's managed to do that. And I think back to the point about having a team, he's assembled a great team around him and he's been very clear about what his brand is, what his brand stands for, and has participated in opportunities that are highly consistent with what his brand vision is for Brand Curry, and that includes Brand Curry for himself as a person and Brand Curry for him and his wife as a unit. I think is really impressive.
Erin?
I have many. But I'll go for the sake of the panel. Juju Smith-Schuster, I think, is one of my favorites on YouTube. He's just been incredible and used the platform in a really authentic way. Like, you watch his content and get a very strong sense of his personality and just like the extent to which he's fun and funny. I'll give you one example. He did like a parody video out of a promise that he had to his mom to go back to school to get his degree. So Juju left USC to declare, and he got drafted, obviously Pittsburgh Steelers. And for one day, he went back to campus in full uniform and sat in on college classes, and it was just amazing, like seeing everybody's reaction, and he was kind of pretending to be a student to finish his degree. And I just thought that was incredible, right? It was hilarious. You got a really strong sense for who he is as a person, and as a fan, I even felt closer to him, and so I thought that was like awesome. But I'll say you see everything on YouTube, right? So like everything from Serge Ibaka, who's insanely passionate about cooking, to Steph Curry and 5 minutes from home. So there's a plethora of things that exist on YouTube. I can't exactly pick one, but that'll be my favorite for today.
And Jeff, I noticed that there is a lot of video content that's on Players Tribune, and these are gorgeous videos, shot beautifully and professionally. I'm wondering, you were talking earlier about how storytelling can sometimes be expensive. What is the sort of process that goes into that? And also, do you guys make determinations early on about what story may work better in text form and what may work better as a video? Yeah,
definitely there's the story and there's the treatment. And when you start getting up sort of into the realm of video or really high quality video, we then try to also incorporate who's the right partner. And that's where, working with the athlete and working with, the partner, it can either be underwritten by a brand, can be underwritten by a platform. And the great thing about high quality content right now is that there's a race across all the platforms to bring unique high quality content on their platforms, and that's the role we've been playing, is building content with athletes and then selling it to distributors. So that's kind of the mechanism that helps support that, and also is yet another way for an athlete to help not only expand their brand, but also develop new relationships with brands or platforms they may not have otherwise.
Well, that will have to be the last word. Thank you so much to my great panel, and thank all of you.